I drove 900 miles from Louisiana to Georgia to attend my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. The journey took 14 exhausting hours across 5 state lines, navigating through the relentless, driving rainstorms of Alabama and the endless, monotonous stretches of interstate highway. I had canceled a fully booked week of appointments at the periodontal clinic, where I work as a senior dental hygienist, actively sacrificing a significant portion of my monthly income to make the trip. I spent my days performing complex scaling and root planing procedures, managing patient schedules, and building a secure, independent life entirely on my own terms. Leaving the clinic required calling over 40 different patients to reschedule their treatments, but I made the calls without a single complaint because family obligation demanded my presence. I am the only daughter in my immediate family, and I have 2 older brothers, Jacob and Elias, who are both permanently stationed outside of the country. Jacob works as a civil engineer, managing infrastructure projects in Munich, and Elias is deployed with the military in Okinawa. Neither of them could secure the necessary international leave to attend the anniversary celebration. More importantly, I was driving across the American South to stand in the gap left by our father, David. He was the absolute pride of our family, the only son born to my grandparents, Samuel and Martha, and he died in a horrific highway collision 5 years prior, when a commercial logging truck lost its brakes on a steep downhill grade. His death completely fractured our family dynamic. Samuel and Martha had spent 4 decades building a massive, highly profitable agricultural enterprise in rural Georgia, consisting of 600 acres of prime pecan orchards and commercial peach groves. My father was slated to take over the daily operations of the entire estate, working side by side with Samuel to modernize the harvesting equipment and expand their distribution contracts. When my father died, the immense grief nearly destroyed my grandparents, leaving them vulnerable, exhausted, and desperately in need of familial support. That vulnerability created a massive opening, and my father's oldest sister, Beatrice, aggressively stepped into the void. Beatrice was one of Samuel and Martha's 3 surviving children, alongside my other aunts, Sylvia and Joanne. Beatrice had spent her entire adult life harboring a deep, toxic resentment toward my father, furious that he was, according to her, the golden child and the heir apparent to the agricultural business, while she bounced between failed entrepreneurial ventures and massive credit card debt. Following the funeral, Beatrice embedded herself in my grandparents' daily lives. She took over their medical appointments, managed their daily banking, and slowly, systematically began isolating them from the rest of the family under the guise of protecting their fragile health. She made it incredibly difficult for me to speak with Samuel and Martha on the phone, constantly screening their calls and offering vague excuses about them needing rest. I made this 900-mile drive to bypass Beatrice's communication blockade, determined to represent my father's memory and show my grandparents that David's children had not abandoned them. The sun had completely set by the time my car tires finally crunched onto the long, winding gravel driveway leading up to the main property. The Georgia air was thick with late summer humidity, carrying the familiar, earthy scent of damp pine needles and ripening fruit. The massive, multi-story farmhouse loomed at the end of the drive, brightly illuminated by dozens of warm exterior lights. Dozens of vehicles were parked haphazardly across the front lawn, confirming that the anniversary celebration was in full swing. I parked my dusty sedan near the edge of the property, turned off the ignition, and sat in the dark cabin for a moment, letting the exhaustion of the long drive wash over me. Through the open window of my car, I heard the distinct sounds of a vibrant party spilling out from the wraparound porch. I heard the bright clinking of crystal glassware, the loud, joyful laughter of my extended relatives, and the overlapping conversations of neighbors and friends who had gathered to celebrate 60 years of marriage. I reached into the passenger seat to grab the expensive, custom-engraved silver platter I had purchased as an anniversary gift. Just as my hand wrapped around the velvet box, my cell phone vibrated violently inside the center console. The bright screen illuminated the dark interior of my car. I picked up the device and saw a text message notification from Beatrice. I opened the message and stared at the glowing letters, feeling a sudden, physical drop in my stomach. Party postponed to next month. Don't waste your time. I read the text 3 times, completely paralyzed by the sheer, unadulterated malice of the lie. I looked up through the windshield at the brightly lit farmhouse. The party was actively happening less than 200 feet away from my steering wheel. I could literally see the silhouettes of my family members moving past the large bay windows. Beatrice knew exactly how far I had driven. She knew I was coming to represent her dead brother, and she possessed the absolute audacity to send a completely fabricated text message, attempting to turn me away at the literal finish line. She wanted me to read the message, put my car in reverse, and drive another 14 hours back to Louisiana, entirely removing my presence from the event. Anger, hot and sharp, immediately replaced my exhaustion. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, grabbed the door handle, and prepared to march directly up the front steps to expose her lie to the entire gathering. I fully intended to walk into the center of the living room, locate Beatrice among the guests, and demand a public explanation. But before I could push the heavy car door open, the phone vibrated a second time. I assumed Beatrice was sending a follow-up lie, perhaps a fake apology about a sudden medical emergency. I picked up the device again. The new message was not from my aunt. It originated from a completely unknown local Georgia area code. The text contained 2 brief sentences, followed immediately by a large attached video file. "Don't interrupt them. You'd give anything to witness the fallout that happens in 5 minutes." I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. The message carried a bizarre, highly specific authority. Whoever sent the text was clearly standing somewhere inside that house, actively watching the party, and entirely aware that I was currently sitting in the dark driveway. I leaned back into the driver's seat, rolled my car window down a few more inches to ensure I could hear the ambient noise from the porch, and tapped the glowing screen to download the mysterious video attachment. The video file loaded quickly, replacing my text message interface with a high-definition recording taken from a stationary, hidden vantage point. I immediately recognized the setting. The camera was pointed through the cracked window of the farmhouse kitchen, looking directly out onto the private back patio. 2 women were sitting at a small wrought iron table, drinking iced tea in the bright afternoon sun. One of the women was Beatrice, wearing a floral blouse and a wide-brimmed sun hat. The other woman was Helen, a notoriously gossipy neighbor who owned the adjacent property and frequently inserted herself into local agricultural politics. Judging by the bright daylight and the specific blooming hydrangeas in the background, the footage had been secretly recorded several weeks prior. I turned the volume up on my phone, holding the speaker close to my ear while keeping my eyes fixed on the brightly lit living room windows of the farmhouse ahead of me. The audio was incredibly crisp. "You just have to maintain control of the narrative, Helen," Beatrice instructed the neighbor, taking a slow sip of her drink. "The old fools do not have long left. Samuel's heart is failing, and Martha can barely remember what she had for breakfast. I have spent the last 5 years managing every single aspect of this farm, and I absolutely refuse to let the estate be divided equally." Helen leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But what about David's kids? Samuel always intended to leave the primary orchards to David. Legally, that inheritance should pass directly down to his children." Beatrice let out a harsh, incredibly ugly laugh that completely lacked any familial warmth. "David is dead. His children are irrelevant. Jacob and Elias are playing soldier and engineer halfway across the world, and Naomi is scrubbing plaque off teeth in Louisiana. They have not contributed a single hour of labor to this soil. I convinced Samuel that David's kids possess zero interest in agriculture. I told him Naomi plans to immediately sell her portion of the land to commercial developers to fund her pathetic little clinic. Samuel despises developers. The mere suggestion terrified him. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned completely white. Beatrice had actively poisoned my grandfather's perception of me, weaponizing his deepest fears about losing the legacy of the farm to manipulate his estate planning. The recording continued. "I marched Samuel down to the estate attorney last Tuesday," Beatrice boasted, a deeply arrogant smile spreading across her face. "I had him draft a total revision of the trust. David's entire bloodline is completely written out. Sylvia and Joanne are only receiving small, insulting cash stipends because Sylvia is a naive parasite, and Joanne is a complete financial liability who would bankrupt a casino. The deeds to the entire 600 acres, the commercial distribution contracts, and the heavy machinery all transfer exclusively to me the minute Samuel flatlines." "That is brilliant, Beatrice," Helen praised, completely endorsing the theft. "You deserve the farm." "Of course I deserve it," Beatrice sneered. "I am the only one capable of running it. I just need to keep Naomi away from the anniversary party this weekend. If she shows up playing the grieving daughter, Samuel might get emotional and start questioning the new trust. I will send her a text saying the event is canceled. She is a weak, submissive little girl. She will turn right around and drive back to her miserable swamp." The video ended, the screen fading to black. I sat in the silent cabin of my car, my lungs burning as I processed the absolute magnitude of the betrayal. Beatrice had not just sent a spiteful text message. She had orchestrated a massive, legally binding financial coup designed to entirely erase my father's legacy and completely disinherit his children. She viewed my grandparents as expiring cash cows. She viewed her own sisters as parasites, and she viewed me as an easily manipulated pawn. I looked down at the unknown number on my screen. I did not know who recorded the conversation, but their timing was absolute perfection. I looked up at the farmhouse. Through the large front windows, I could see Samuel standing in the center of the living room. He was holding a crystal champagne flute, tapping a silver spoon against the glass to gather the attention of the crowd. The ambient noise from the porch completely died down. The guests turned their attention to the patriarch of the family. Samuel began to speak, his voice carrying faintly across the dark lawn, delivering a heartfelt toast to his wife of 60 years. Beatrice was standing directly next to him, wearing a stunning evening gown, smiling radiantly for the professional photographer hired to document the event. Suddenly, a second text message from the unknown number appeared on my screen. I just forwarded the video to the family group chat, the estate attorney's email, and the digital projector in the living room. I dropped my phone onto the passenger seat and leaned entirely forward, pressing my hands against the steering wheel to brace myself. Through the large bay windows, I saw the massive flat-screen television mounted above the stone fireplace suddenly violently flicker. The slideshow of vintage family photographs completely disappeared. The screen went entirely black for 2 seconds before the bright, high-definition footage of Beatrice sitting on the patio with Mrs. Gable filled the massive display. At the exact same microsecond, I heard the synchronized, echoing chime of dozens of cell phones receiving a notification inside the house. Samuel stopped speaking mid-sentence. He turned his head slowly, looking up at the television screen. The audio from the video had automatically routed through the expensive surround sound speakers installed in the living room ceiling. Beatrice's arrogant, venomous voice suddenly blasted through the entire house, perfectly audible even from my position in the dark driveway. The old fools do not have long left. Samuel's heart is failing, and Martha can barely remember what she had for breakfast. The entire party froze in a state of absolute paralyzing horror. The guests stood completely motionless, their eyes darting between the massive television screen and the woman standing in the center of the room. Sylvia and Joanne, standing near the kitchen entrance, pulled their phones out of their purses, watching the exact same footage play on their personal screens. I watched through the glass as Beatrice physically recoiled, the color completely draining from her face, transforming her radiant smile into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She dropped her champagne flute. The crystal hit the hardwood floor, spilling expensive alcohol across the polished planks. The fallout had officially begun, and I had the best seat in the house. The silence inside the farmhouse lasted exactly 10 seconds before the entire gathering violently exploded into total chaos. From the safety of my dark car, I watched the structural integrity of Beatrice's entire life completely disintegrate. Sylvia was the first to react. She lunged forward, pushing past a group of terrified neighbors, pointing an accusatory finger directly at Beatrice's face. "You called me a parasite," Sylvia screamed, her voice tearing through the open windows and echoing across the lawn. "You manipulated our father into writing us out of the will while pretending to manage his health care. You absolute monster." Joanne immediately joined the assault, throwing her expensive clutch purse onto the sofa. "You stole David's inheritance. You lied to Samuel about Naomi selling the land. You are a thief, Beatrice. A greedy, miserable thief." The guests, recognizing they were witnessing a catastrophic family implosion, immediately began shuffling toward the front door, desperate to escape the crossfire. Dozens of people poured out onto the wraparound porch, whispering frantically to each other as they hurried toward their parked vehicles. I remained entirely still in the driver's seat, watching the exodus. Inside the living room, Samuel stood rigidly in front of the fireplace, staring at the frozen image of Beatrice on the television screen. His shoulders were trembling, not from frailty but from a profound, earth-shattering rage. He turned his head and looked directly at his oldest daughter. "You forged out about my dead son's children," Samuel stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commanded absolute silence from everyone remaining in the room. "You used my grief against me. You told me Naomi hated this farm. You told me she despised the dirt her father died working on." Beatrice held her hands up in a desperate, frantic gesture of surrender, her eyes darting wildly around the room. Dad, please listen to me. It is a fabrication. It is an edited video. Someone altered the audio to frame me. You cannot believe a random text message over your own daughter. A figure stepped out from the dark hallway leading to the kitchen, stepping into the bright light of the living room. It was Silas, Beatrice's 24-year-old son, a quiet, observant young man whom Beatrice constantly berated and dismissed as the family disappointment. Silas held his smartphone in his hand, looking directly at his mother with an expression of total disgust. "I recorded it, Mom," Silas announced, completely destroying her defense. "I stood in the kitchen and recorded the entire conversation through the cracked window. I listened to you plot to steal my grandfather's legacy and rob my cousins of their birthright. I sent the video to the attorney. I sent it to the projector. I sent it to the group chat." Beatrice stared at her own son, her mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound, entirely trapped by the inescapable reality of her own arrogance. I knew this was the exact moment. I grabbed the silver anniversary gift from the passenger seat, pushed open my heavy car door, and stepped out onto the gravel. The night air hit my face as I walked with intense purpose toward the brightly lit porch. I climbed the wooden steps, walked past a few lingering, shocked neighbors, and stepped directly through the open front door into the living room. Every single head in the room snapped toward me. Sylvia gasped. Joanne covered her mouth with her hands. Samuel's eyes widened in absolute shock, his face softening the instant he recognized his dead son's features in my face. Beatrice physically shrank back, pressing her spine against the dining table, looking at me as if a ghost had just walked through the wall. I did not scream. I did not raise my voice or throw a dramatic tantrum. I simply walked into the center of the room, pulled my cell phone from my pocket, and held the screen up directly in front of Beatrice's terrified face. "Party postponed to next month. Don't waste your time," I read aloud, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. I turned my head and looked directly at Samuel. "I drove 900 miles from Louisiana to celebrate your 60 years of marriage. I arrived 10 minutes ago. Beatrice sent me this text message while I was sitting in your driveway, attempting to turn me away so I would not be present to expose her lies." Samuel looked at my phone screen, reading the text message, before turning his gaze back to Beatrice. The absolute finality in his eyes was terrifying. He did not yell. He pointed a steady, unwavering finger toward the front door. "Get out of my house," Samuel commanded. "Dad, please," Beatrice begged, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "You do not possess the right to call me that anymore," Samuel interrupted, his tone completely void of affection. "You will leave this property immediately. Do not return. I am calling the estate attorney at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to completely dissolve the fraudulent trust you forced me to sign. You will receive absolutely nothing from this family ever again." Beatrice looked at Sylvia, Joanne, and finally at her own son, Silas, searching for a single ally in the room. She found absolutely no one. She grabbed her purse from the table and walked out the front door, humiliated, utterly defeated, and entirely stripped of the empire she had conspired to steal. When the sound of her car engine finally faded down the gravel driveway, Samuel walked across the living room and pulled me into a fierce, desperate embrace. Martha joined us, weeping quietly, apologizing repeatedly for allowing Beatrice to twist their perception of my father's children. I held them both, reassuring them that the deception was entirely over, that Jacob and Elias loved them deeply, and that the farm would remain securely in the hands of the people who actually respected the soil. I walked over to Silas, entirely ignoring the chaotic whispering of the remaining guests, and extended my hand. He shook it firmly. He had sacrificed his own relationship with his mother to protect a grandfather he respected, and a cousin he barely knew. I thanked him for his profound integrity, promising him that his actions would never be forgotten. I spent the next 4 days sleeping in my father's old childhood bedroom, helping Samuel and the estate attorney navigate the complex legal process of restoring the original trust documents. Beatrice was permanently disinherited. The entire 600-acre property, the distribution contracts, and the heavy machinery were legally divided equally between my brothers, myself, Sylvia, Joanne, and Silas, ensuring the legacy my father built would never fall into the hands of a predator. When I finally started my sedan and merged back onto the interstate for the 14-hour drive home to Louisiana, I felt an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. I had driven across the country expecting to attend a simple anniversary party. Instead, I had successfully executed my father's final, unspoken duty, permanently securing the future of our family and ensuring the absolute destruction of the person who tried to steal it.